What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. Today we're looking at a deck in the Fusion Strike standard format, but stick around to the end of the video because with all of my Fusion Strike deck profiles from here until Brilliant Stars, I will be discussing how the deck either changes or fares, or generally how it translates into the Brilliant Stars format, whether it gains cards, whether it gains good matchups, things like that. So stick around because I will be discussing that towards the end of the video. Well, we will be looking at this Fighting Dark single prize-ish deck. I don't know what to call it. It's got Galarian Moltres and Galarian Zapdos in it. All of its placements on Limitless are still listed as other at this time, but this exact list got third in a 300 plus person online event. And I've also seen similar lists win events online. So the deck has been doing pretty well. So we're going to talk about this today. And like I said, also talk about how it will be in about a month or so with the Brilliant Stars cards released. Before we get into all of that, shout out to PotownStore.com, the best place to get PTCGO codes, and CardTrooperGames.com, where you can find physical card product like Brilliant Stars booster box pre-orders for $114.99 before using code CELIO for 5% off. You can find my current standard format deck lists over at PokemonCard.io, and please subscribe to the new Beast Coast Pokemon YouTube channel where I create collaborative content with the rest of the team over there weekly. Subscribe to this channel as well for daily Pokemon TCG content. And now let's get into it. So we are dealing with our Fighting Dark deck. I've been calling all of the Moltres, Weezing, Hoopa, Sableye decks just Dark deck. And so I'm probably just going to call this Fighting Dark deck until I have a better name for it or you tell me what it's called. But the deck is interesting and I'm super stoked to see this kind of deck come out in the metagame. The basis of this idea is Mew's very popular and it's weak to dark. Jolteon is very popular and it's weak to fighting. Let's play fighting and dark Pokemon. The Galarian Moltres and Galarian Zapdos both have the same ability, except for their respective types of energies. So Galarian Zapdos, when you play it from hand to bench, you may attach up to 2 basic fighting energy cards from your hand to the Pokemon, and Galarian Moltres, of course, has the same ability, but for Dark. Now, Galarian Zapdos is not as good of an attacker as Galarian Moltres is, but you can use it sparingly. It has to discard all of its energy, but it does 70, potentially 140 if they're weak to fighting, and your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed. What Galarian Zapdos is really great for is moving energy over to the Galarian Sirfetch'd V. It has the ability Resolute Spear. Once during your turn, when this Pokemon moves from your bench to the active spot, you may move any amount of fighting energy from your other Pokemon to it, and then it does 200 damage. So this is great for knocking out anything that's weak to fighting. In the current game, that's going to namely be Jolteon VMAX, and the dark weakness from Galarian Moltres is going to be great for hitting into Mew VMAX. This deck is using a really cool and tried and true draw engine that's kind of gotten phased out ever since the Chilling Reign era, where the Inteleon engine just became very, very rampant and popular and like the main way to build decks. But Cinccino allows you to discard a card from your hand to draw 2 cards, and Snorlax's Gourmandize is interesting for this deck because if it's in the active, you can draw until you have 7 and then your turn ends. And a lot of time, this deck just wants to sit back and wait for the opponent so you can respond accordingly. Because Moltres' damage scales up for every prize card your opponent has taken. Sometimes you just want to wait until your opponent's attacker is out in the active and then you can strike. But sometimes you can also use Hoopa's Assault Gate to just swing a respectable 90 damage in and get some damage set up. Galarian Sirfetch'd V is here, like I said, for the Jolteon matchup. Jolteon does play Path to the Peaks, which would shut off the ability, so make sure you save your training courts to coincide with when you need to play down the Galarian Sirfetch'd. Let's look at the matchups of the player Dauber2723, who got 3rd place with this deck in a 300 plus person event. They did end up losing, unfortunately, to Jolteon VMAX. Jolteon VMAX went on into the finals So that is pretty interesting to see. The Jolteon did play 4 Path to the Peak, so what I was mentioning there about holding on to your training courts to bump the paths could actually have mattered there, but we don't really know for sure. We'll see that they beat plenty of Jolteons, though. They went 4-0-1, so 4 wins and 1 intentional draw versus Jolteons up until their top 4 game where they lost to Jolteon. So that's a very good record. And then against Mew, they went completely undefeated against Mew. They beat 3 and intentionally drew to 1 to just go into top cut. They lost to Gabriel Fernandez, who I believe was playing a similar deck. Yeah, they were playing potentially the same exact list, a little different, playing 2 capture, an extra training court, but lost to essentially the mirror match. So the only losses were the top 4 match against Jolteon and the mirror match in round 3 versus Gabriel Fernandez, who is a great player. Notably, they did beat their top 4 matchup in round 9 of Phase 1 Swiss. So that's something to note as well. So this deck, I think, is in a really interesting position. I'm sure it's very poor against Rapid Strike Urshifu because, you have a lot of little Pokemon. The Rapid Strike Urshifu can just dismantle your board in no time. But let's look at this tournament's metagame. Looking like there was not a lot of Rapid Strike Urshifu at all. You'll see Rapid Strike Urshifu all the way down here. The only other damage spread deck was Jolteon, and this deck, of course, is going to take care of Jolteon pretty well, so it makes sense why the deck can perform right now. But let's talk about what it gains in Brilliant Stars. One of the main thing that most single prize decks are going to gain in Brilliant Stars is going to be this Mana V with the Bench Barrier or Wave Veil ability. Prevent all damage done to your benched Pokemon by your opponent's attacks. By the way, shout out to, gosh, whoever made this Google Drive. This is either Talonite's Google Drive or Jack Old from Omnipoke's Google Drive of cards. I believe this is Jack Old's, but I could be mistaken. I have both of their Google Drives on my Google Drive. But yeah, so Manaphy, this isn't obviously the English copy, but it has translations on it, has the bench barrier, and that's going to be very, very important for these kinds of decks that have the setup Pokemon like Chinchino on the bench with very low HP. You don't want them getting Jolteoned and Rapid Strike Urshifu to oblivion. So Manaphy is going to protect them from a lot of stuff. This is a small note, but we do get a better Minccino in Brilliant Stars as well with the Call for Family. Search your deck for up to 2 basic Pokemon, and that's going to likely be replacing the 70 HP Minccino that does not have a Call for Family attack, so that's going to be nice. We also get Choice Belt. Choice Belt can potentially be good. This can make your Hoopadoo 120 now, your Sirfetch'd V 230, your Galarian Moltres scale up from a base of 20 to a base of 50, and plus whatever else you're doing. Zapdos even doing 100 or 200 after weakness. So the Choice Belt can potentially be going into this deck. You can even consider Bibarel line instead of the Chinchino line. And now something that's not necessarily for this deck list, but good for the deck, is going to be Arceus V-Star. This is going to be a probably mainstay of the standard format for the foreseeable future once it releases, and it is weak to fighting. So the best card of Brilliant Stars, and probably going to be the most popular V-Star out of Brilliant Stars, is weak to fighting. So we gain a good matchup. We gain bench barrier. We gain a small addition, which is the new Minccino with Call for Family. I think this deck just gets better, if anything, as long as the metagame doesn't drastically change. I think Mew VMAX should still be a tier 1 deck. It might still be the best deck, even. And then we're also gaining the new Arceus. Now, Jolteon may diminish in play because of the new bench barrier, but we're also getting Raikou V, and we're also getting Raichu V. So those are 2 more fighting weak Pokemon. We'll just look at them briefly. I do think Raichu V will see some play that's fighting weak, and Raikou V will see some play that's fighting weak as well. So even if we do lose Jolteon, it gets replaced by two other potential lightning type decks, or even Jolteon with one of those lightning type decks, and of course the Arceus V-Star that is weak to fighting, and we keep Mew V Max that is weak to dark. I can't imagine Mew V Max going anywhere. So I think this deck gains more options for deck building, and potentially its matchups either get better or at worst stay the same. So I think this deck is definitely something to consider for the new format if you want to start practicing it in this format and getting a grip on how the deck works. I don't think that's a bad idea at all, since it should still be good, maybe even better with the release of Brilliant Stars. So if you've liked this new kind of deck profile today where we looked at a deck for current format, but there's not a lot going on competitively and officially for this current standard format, and we're talking about the deck, how it is now, but also looking ahead for Brilliant Stars, let me know if you enjoyed that in the description down below, and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Check out all my sponsors in the links down below, and I'll see you next time here on Celios Network.